Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Ephrata Community Church weekly podcast, a conversation with our pastors and leaders meant to continue encouraging you to know God, know freedom, know purpose, and make a difference.
Hey Ephrata Community Church, it's great to have you joining us on our weekly podcast. So grateful to have the opportunity to connect with you through this and talk about the weekend service. Jim, it's great to be on with you. You were the service pastor this past weekend.
I love it.
We have a number of things we're going to jump into, but first, I just want to hear from you. Scale of 1 to 5, how amazing was this past weekend as a service pastor?
I give it like a 4 or 5, but there's deeper reasons behind that. I think God's up to something, and I think we saw little pieces. But we've sensed something about His presence, and I felt like I saw some pieces this weekend. So I left the weekend pumped about the move of God. And I know that sounds cliche, but and I think in general it was a nice weekend.
Yeah.
I like the new series. Yeah.
Yeah, and this series, how long is this series actually?
I think it's only 3 or 4 weeks.
Right, it's pretty
Let
short.
It Rain, we're exploring the theology of the kingdom, truthfully, right? And anyway, we could dive into that right away if you want. But
well, I mean, there's a lot. Perhaps people are familiar with this, maybe some aren't, but this whole year actually has been focused on the Jesus being revealed to us, represented by us, to the world around us. Mm-hmm. And so every series this year is unto that end, correct? Mm-hmm. So the Let It Rain is one part of that. Would you, since we just started it, why don't you share what, coming out of the next few weeks when we're done with this series, what's the vision that people are walking away with?
Amen. Straight up. Let me just say this, man. I like to call this the red letter year.
Okay.
If we're looking at a passage, it's because we're looking at the red letters. Some of you have Bibles where they put Jesus' words in red. There's not a passage that we're studying this year that isn't the red letters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we might have been studying the book of John, but around the 7 signs, but it was mostly talking about the red letters, like the things he said when he was turning water to wine, etc. So it's a red letter year, which is a little different than if we study Paul or something like that, or we look at Luke as an individual and how he interpreted it. So all that to say, deeply into the red letters, and therefore, what's it mean to have Christ formed in us, and then turn around and give that away. So I would say that the kingdom teaching in particular is a reminder that salvation is more. It's more than just about salvation, because predominantly if you're tuning into ECC, you are likely have a background in the evangelical and holiness streams. And we were spoon-fed a gospel of salvation, that the climactic self-renunciation of giving your life to Jesus is the epicenter of the Christian journey, right? And even if you don't necessarily grow much beyond that, that is the sole informer of what this king's about, and then the rest of the eternity is for cleaning up the universe, right? Mm. And the gospel of the kingdom is different, man. It's going to challenge you that some of the systems in your family can change. Some of the way you view the spheres of society can change. Right. Some of the ways you posture in this world are super important. The kingdom was a broad salvation. I always say this. The kingdom is like a shalom compass, meaning you're coming to peace with God, which is salvation, with yourself, with others, and with the created order, or with society and the created order. That's the gospel of the kingdom. It's all 4 points on this compass. And anyway, you got me preaching already.
Well, behind the scenes, one of the things we love to talk about on this podcast is bring more behind the scenes experiences. And so Saturday night, Wes would have shared with the team that he had a great conversation. I'm not going to share or divulge any information about that particular conversation other than to highlight the commonality, or how common that type of conversation is to be had, which is, I've never heard this before.
Yeah, I've never heard this phrase, the gospel of the kingdom.
Right.
And what's it mean to be joining that, right?
Right, and so Kevin gets up, and this isn't the first time he's preached this message here. This is a common cultural piece of Ephrata Community Church, the DNA of what we believe. But is it fair to say that, put simply, there's the gospel of salvation, which most people, of course, believers would be familiar with that. But that's like an eternal reality.
It's a soul salvation. In other words, I will be in heaven with Him one day, and everything will be great.
Right.
It's true.
But the gospel of the kingdom, is it fair to say that includes everything on earth now, between now and eternity?
Yeah, and Jesus said, "Thy kingdom come, in on the earth. Thy kingdom come in Ephrata as it is in heaven. That is a now, not a New Jerusalem worldview of like when it's all cleaned up, right?
Yeah. And so, were there other conversations that you had this weekend? I don't know this. I'm just curious. Did you actually? Let me start over. You, in particular, had a significant shift of perspective. You shared when you first started coming here and heard this message for the first time. What was that like?
Yeah, it was huge. First of all, when you're older and you feel that you know the boundaries, the broad boundaries of the faith, to realize that your boundary was set really inappropriately in one area is always a bit disorienting. But praise God to be a part of a community that kind of gently is willing to lead you into that. It was really unsettling at first to say, I don't know what a gospel of the kingdom is, and then to begin to let that in. And I would have to say the best way I describe it getting into me was that there is the opportunity for transformation and peace in every area of my life. That this world is not just about soul salvations unto a day when everything is made right. The active desiring to make right. So I was more inspired in trying to fix some things in my family, trying to build certain, break certain habits in my own life. I felt more empowered in the moment. The gospel of the kingdom is about human flourishing now unto the glory of God.
Right.
And you would have to sit and say, well, didn't you think that when it came to salvation? I wish the gospel of salvation, I wish, but it's just really easy to stay focused on eternal things versus what the kingdom has to offer the immediate, right? The way I'm parenting, the way I'm in my marriage, the way and that's what was transformative.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so we'll focus in on this past weekend. You were service pastoring. Kevin obviously brought the message, which was called the gospel of the kingdom. And he shared out of Matthew 13, highlighting several parables that are all Jesus communicating using that language, the kingdom of heaven is like. And that's where we draw an understanding of what the gospel of the kingdom is. But he led with Matthew 4:23, saying Jesus went about preaching and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom everywhere he went. And you realize, wow, what did Jesus do then? And then everything he did, from sharing messages to healing the sick and casting out demons, all of that falls categorically under this gospel of the kingdom.
Oh yeah, to having the size of entourage he did, to have women traveling in his entourage.
Yeah.
His gospel was way more holistic.
Right, the Sabbath, breaking the Sabbath.
Oh yeah, exactly.
There's so many things. So, and then Kevin goes into the parables and starts breaking down these things. So from the message, Jim, there was a point that you wanted to pull out from this message and kind of highlight or speak to a little deeper. I want to give you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think for me was, I was impacted by two things. One, I want to talk about why Kevin spent 10 minutes on the Apostle Paul.
Okay.
I want to do that a little bit later, because he really did. He launched with a story about how Paul has inspired him. But I think what hit me about the actual reading that we did, first of all, it was an extended reading. I love when we stand sometimes for the readings of the gospel,
agreed.
Right? It has this important impact on us. But I think what was key to me was I began to notice that 3/4 of those stories were slow impact stories. It is like a seed that grows onto this. It is like leaven, which brings about this. Jesus is giving you a hint about the kind of royal rule and reign of him incrementally increasing in yourself and in this world. And be at peace with that, right? In other words, the gospel of the kingdom is not a climactic thing. It is a taking over of the real estate inside of you and in this world. That I was just reminded that Jesus was in it for the long game, right? And what it means, therefore, to stay proactive yet at peace was all over those kingdom parables.
That just reminds me how important, especially for those who fall into that place of this is all brand new. One, to me, I imagine, well, then just as you sit in it, as you say, okay, Jesus, I don't necessarily understand all this yet, but I'm open to you revealing it to me, just like leaven, it'll take over, like it'll have its influence and working in and through you. where you arrive at greater revelation in time. You might not conveniently, you might not have it the first week or the first 2 weeks, but over time you're transformed by this kingdom, which is like leaven and makes its way whole through the whole batch. And that I find encouragement even now as I reflect on that for myself personally, as I'm praying into things, I'm seeking God for things, and just, man, I want it right now. I wish it was here yesterday type of thing. Right. But there's a lot of peace in when Jesus says, hey, don't forget the kingdom of heaven. It's like leaven, and it gets worked in, and over time, it'll make its way through the entire batch.
And I also heard Kevin's pastoral heart in this too, where he wants to make these teachings very practical, but I've also sensed in him that the way to make it most practical to us almost looks self-serving. It's for him to stand up and say, engage more with this community known as Effort Community Church, and you'll see the kingdom.
Sure.
It sounds like a proud statement, but I'm telling you, our 4 core values of know God, know freedom,
right,
know purpose, make a difference.
It's all the kingdom.
They are the 4 kingdom principles,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Know God as a father judge, right? A father king. Know freedom. Believe for the transformed life, not merely the shock absorbers to ride this life out.
Yep.
And then know purpose and turn then and believe for something.
Yeah.
So one of the words that I received during the service was not simply to be someone who believes, but believes what they have enough to believe for something different in this world.
Yeah.
That is the gospel of the kingdom in a church that's trying to live it. So at one level, I would say, man, you want to know more about gospel of the kingdom, simply engage around here. And it sounds self-serving to almost say it, but it's what
it's infused in everything we do.
Right.
And we believe in the empowerment of the Spirit, because the gospel of salvation only has no place for that, because it's all, you're saved and then give it time and you'll be in heaven.
Yeah, know him.
Yeah.
But and even then, it's like, know him as your judge that's removed the wrath that's upon you, right?
Correct.
That's a one-dimensional take, a right one, but it's one-dimensional.
Right.
We are believing the kingdom was more.
Man, that's awesome. So spend some time on Paul.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what your thoughts are there.
Well, I just want to highlight the Paul thing because, first of all, I love Kevin a lot. As a matter of fact, I would rank him in a role model, a friend.
Yeah.
I think he has an apostolic streak. In other words, not just a pastoral streak, but he's an apostle pastor, meaning he is always trying to remind us there's a higher pasture to get to.
Yeah.
I just happen to know that stuff is going on in Kevin right now that he himself believes he's not fully laid hold of that which he's been made for. That's what Paul's great phrase. I mean, there he is. I mean, and Kevin he's up there giving an almost autobiographical reason we're in this series, like, I want more of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm 60. I'm Paul's age when he wrote this.
Yeah.
And I can completely identify with Paul saying, I feel like I haven't attained it yet. And not in a kind of like, I'll never get there kind of thing, like, oh, there's more I'm being invited into. And then Kevin's apostolicness can't help but want to take us along.
Yeah,
right?
and we're all along for the ride.
Oh, and I'm in, man. Game on.
Yep. And you capture that in every message he delivers, which is there's more. Press in, let's go. And, you might not get it the first time. You might move on in life. But as you're immersed in a culture, it's like a current. So long as you're in this current, you almost have to actively resist the kingdom in order to not be influenced by it. Then you will just to kind of lean back, engage the community, just like you were saying. If this is all new for people, we'll just engage. We're going into the fall semester, right? You're going to hear a lot through August and going into September. Take one step. What's the one thing the Holy Spirit would tell you to do?
That's right.
And essentially it's to say, get into the current of what it means to say yes to following Jesus. And with an understanding that he wants to show you the abundant life in every area of your life,
and then
which is
out
the
of you
kingdom.
will flow rivers of living water to everything around you. You're up there. It's so refreshing to be in a community where it doesn't even cross my mind that Kevin's trying to inspire us so that we can make the budget or get more numbers, right? Or we're not a community that's programming is about the gospel of sin management, just how to keep you somehow pure unto the Lord until that day, right? The gospel of the kingdom is one of flourishing, engagement, dominion taking, winning back the authority of this world that's been handed over to the enemy and ridiculousness. Man, that was just all over. I mean, maybe not everyone caught it to the level that I or you have the ability to see the angle of what's going on here as far as what we're believing for. But man, it was all over it, that we're a community that, it sounds cliche to say on the move, but we're heading to a higher pasture. I hope you're willing to come, because we'll put shepherds at the front and the back, try to keep you moving along. But this community is trying to find a higher pasture, not even for our own sake or some high. It is unto the kingdom coming in this region.
And over time, as these messages begin by being new, and you engage in the culture and you just stick it out, you just stick around. Man, the testimony video we just showed, that's the gospel of the kingdom. Stage 4 cancer is healed, medically verified. And what is that? That's a testimony that the living God is not reserved for an eternal future whenever you happen to pass on into it. It is for the here and now, that God is alive and he's drawing everybody near to himself, and he can be experienced. He's not just alive, but he can be known.
And can I do a commercial
Please.
while we're doing this? Because Matt and I, just before this meeting, we're doing some discipleship planning for the fall, and we're refitting what used to be known the growth group, Exploring the Prophetic, and we're pivoting it back to being exploring the biblical foundations, or looking at the biblical foundations of the prophetic. And I think even more in the prophetic, it's words of knowledge, it's healing, it's deliverance. And so we're even slowing this thing down. We are on the move, but we're like, hold a second. You might have joined this community at some point, and you love the community. You don't always get everything we believe in. And we're like, man, what's it mean to slow that down and say, hold a second. Why don't we explore the biblical foundations of this kind of worldview, this way of thinking, this gospel of the kingdom unto God's gifts being released on the earth. And I'm pretty pumped about it. So even if you're listening to this podcast, and I know we're somewhat preaching to the choir on the podcast, but I'm telling you, we are after making sure every sheep that we're blessed to call part of this community is cared for as we engage with this, because we're going somewhere. We're believing God's going to use this community.
And we don't want to assume that everybody's on the same page either, especially when you have people that are, the variety of backgrounds people engage or bring to their Ephrata Community Church experience, of course, is varied. But the growth group you're mentioning specifically, the biblical foundations for prophecy, we're looking to be 4 weeks, right in around there. So it's real short and sweet, delivers some excellent
And believe me, Matt and I were talking about all the places we'd want to go with it, and we had to keep trimming it back to what is it to fully unlock confidence that this is what God's doing. And then we can actually say, okay, I will explore that.
It gets me excited, because you're taking a population of people within the corporate setting who might be carrying reservations in and out of each weekend, and saying, hey, let's talk through this. Let's process Q&A. Let's invite the Spirit of God to reveal this truth, so that this population of people is no longer carrying reservations into the services anymore. And we're all moving forward together.
That's what it's going to be about.
It's beautiful.
Maybe we can, Don't get me excited. Well, we appreciate y'all. You going to wrap this up?
You were about to. I was going to let you run with it. But Jim, it's always fun to chat with you.
It's always fun.
It's a privilege to have you on the team and connect with you on the team this way. Thanks for everyone joining us this week. I look forward to being with you this coming weekend. We're going to continue week 2 of the series. You're also going to be hearing about specifically taking one step as we engage just the launch of our fall semester. So we have a lot of things. Everything on the website is updated at the end of the day today. All the links will be live. Everything will be there. So check out the website and see what step the Lord would have you take this fall semester. However, until we see you again next week on the podcast, thanks for being here, and God bless.
Oh, and pray for me. I'm at Rollinsville all week preaching at a Bible camp. All right, my commercial's over. Bye.
Goodbye.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today. We hope that you've been encouraged by listening. You can listen to previous episodes, find additional resources, and of course, learn more about us at EphrataCommunityChurch.com.